Big day yesterday for Penn State basketball, especially when it comes to recruiting and roster building. So we bring in our basketball expert, Dave Eckert, on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Dave, big basketball day yesterday. How are you feeling after the flurry of activity?
Yeah, it was a little refreshing, right? You know, you're talking about basketball in late March, right? Doesn't happen with Penn State too often.
Not the same way as what it might sound like when you say that, but yeah, exactly.
No. Yeah, it was interesting. It's a couple important pieces of news that we can get to. So it should be a fun conversation.
Yeah, 2022 and 2023 are taking shape for Penn State basketball. Just as a kind of a housekeeping note, the BWI Daily Edition comes out around 4 o'clock. We are going to discuss Penn State football a little bit later, but we are recording this in the morning. This comes out later in the day, and most likely you'll be watching this probably when we're at practice. So we're not going to have any updates for you on the Daily today when it comes to practice because of that sort of like time lapse there, but we will be getting to some of our thoughts about Penn State spring football today. And then, of course, tomorrow on the BWI Mailbag Edition, we'll get to your thoughts on Penn State football. So that's all coming up in the near future for the Nittany Lions football team. Also, we'll have an update from practice tonight, so make sure you stay tuned for that as well. And if you don't want to miss any of these things, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button, and then you don't miss anything. And, of course, if you want to hit notifications so you never miss the second it comes out. But, Dave, Logan Imes, big news yesterday. Tell us about the 6'4" point guard.
Yeah, this is one that Penn State staff is really excited about. So Penn State landed Logan Imes, as you said, 6'4" guard out of Zionsville High School in Indiana. He's had a relationship with the Shrewsberry family. He played with Braeden Shrewsberry on the prep basketball circuit, or excuse me, the AAU basketball circuit. And yeah, he's a creative guard. He's somebody that Penn State's been chasing for a long time. He's been one of their top point guard targets. So yeah, big get for the Nittany Lions.
So how big of a deal, I guess, is it that they got him in terms of he's an unranked player according to On3. So what is it about him that Penn State wanted so badly? I understand the relationship with the Shrewsberrys, but on the court, why was he such a high priority player for Penn State?
Yeah, he's somebody that can play effectively in Penn State's system, right? If you look at what Penn State needs from its guards, it needs an ability to play in the pick and roll. And that's something that Logan Himes does very well. It kind of is just everything comes through that guard, right? You know, if you watch Jalen Pickett, this season, that's effectively what Penn State wants. And, Logan Imes has maybe not the entire skill set, but a similar skill set that can play well in that system. So, they think he can really create. They really like his passing ability. He's improving as a shooter. He can defend. So yeah, I know that, some folks on our message board actually were like, they did the whole, like, he doesn't have any stars thing.
Right.
And I kind of had to dive in and say he doesn't have any stars because he hasn't had the opportunity to get in front of the right people.
Right.
So I would expect that by the end of the summer, there will be some stars next to his name. So everybody relax. We're going to have some stars. It's going to be okay. The world isn't ending.
That's why I wanted to ask that question, because clearly there's a disconnect between what Penn State sees and what the recruiting industry has or hasn't seen. So that sort of information important and context to fill out. He chose Penn State over, and if the, after the list, was there really a competition, or was it Penn State and then if Penn State didn't want him? How did that really work out from what you saw?
Yeah, I think there was a competition, right? He was on campus at a couple of these places. I think he went to Butler. So the three best offers that he had were Butler, Creighton, and Virginia Tech. He went to Virginia Tech too, now that I think about it. But yeah, so I do think that this was a competition. I don't think it was like always Penn State. The way that he explained it to me was, before he came for his visit, his Penn State official visit, which was on March 16th, he was like, okay, I'm at the point where if this goes well, I could see myself committing shortly after. And I guess it went well. So yeah, I think there was kind of a situation where like, maybe if Indiana or Purdue had given him that offer, then maybe, it might have thrown a wrench in things, but both of those programs took point guards already in their 2023 class.
Mm-hmm.
So that probably helped Penn State a little bit. So yeah, Penn State beat out, I would say, at least 3 programs that are probably like above them on the food chain. 2 good Big East schools in Butler and Creighton, and then, an NCAA tournament team that just won the ACC and Virginia Tech. And then, his other notable offer was probably Wake Forest. And, it's probably debatable whether they're above Penn State on the food chain or not, but still, somebody that had interest from, maybe not big time programs, but programs with successful basketball histories.
6'4", 175, and you're seeing his highlights here if you're watching on YouTube, which is always a benefit of watching on YouTube. What do you think about his game as far as we've been told he's a creative player? He mentioned that in your article. Can get to the bucket with some creativity, so not without tools, but the way he described himself, creativity, vision, and basketball IQ. What do you think his best attribute is amongst those?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask him, and certainly I'm not a basketball scout, so I'll go with what he says. Is probably his creativity, right? And I think that kind of meshes with what Penn State wants out of that position. And when people read creativity, I think they think passing, but I think it's kind of everything, right? He can create for himself. He can create for his teammates. Here, right, you see him, going off a ball screen there, just a little bit above the 3-point line. He's going to be doing a lot of that at Penn State. Right here, again, same thing. So, yeah, I think he's a creator. So, I think he's got to probably improve a little bit shooting the ball.
Mm-hmm.
He's got some time to do that. But I think he was 32% from 3, if his max preps profile is correct, which 50-50. But
I think Penn State fans would like to see it be 50-50.
Yeah, well, yeah, he might play in the NBA if it's 50-50.
So that's an interesting profile from a player that feels like he's ascending for the Nittany Lions. So what does the class of 2023 look like at this point with the committed players, and then we'll get into the prospects they're looking at outside of there?
Yeah, so Logan is the second commit for Penn State in the class of 2023. The other one is Braeden Shrewsberry, his buddy, and Micah Shrewsberry's son, obviously. Another guard. So Penn State has 2 guards now. So you probably might look for some guys at other positions moving forward. But yeah, 2 guys that can score the ball. Braden's probably, wouldn't say he's a better scorer, but I think that's probably like a bigger part of his game.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing is they're probably going to play on the same AAU team this summer. So I think it'll be the 3rd year that they do that. So we'll get like they'll get another chance to play together. And sometimes those games are on TV and stuff. So, Penn State fans might be able to watch 2 future Nittany Lions kind of play together if they want. So, yeah, good start to the class, I would say. There are some big fish out there that Penn State is involved with that I think if they land 1 or 2 of those and you keep Imes and Shrewsberry, then you're talking about a really good class. So, we'll see. We'll see where they end up.
Would that be back-to-back good classes then for Shrewsberry to start his career at Penn State? A very important way to start as well. So let's talk about some current Nittany Lions. Not only did Penn State get a commit yesterday, they also got a player in the transfer portal by the fact he didn't leave. And Myles Dread announced he's returning to Penn State next season. Also announced that he had a torn shoulder labrum that he played with last season. So when it comes to Myles Dread, what does he bring to the table in terms of his timetable to return? Because I was looking up how long it takes to recover from and he called it severely torn shoulder labrum. It may require 6 months to a year. So what are you expecting out of Myles Dread next season?
Yeah, I just want to point out to you, Frank, real quick. I don't believe that he was ever in the transfer portal. I think he's just saying that he's going to use his 5th year here.
Right, right. And that was artistic liberties with my wording. But yes, very important to be factual about the fact that he never entered his name in the portal. It was just a question of whether or not he was going to stay because of the situation we just outlined.
Right. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know. This is the first time that I'm hearing the timeline for a torn shoulder labrum. So if it's 6 months, then that puts him probably just about on pace to be okay for the start of the season, right?
Yeah.
If it's longer than that, then yeah, it's gonna eat into 2022-23 here. So, I mean, look, I would expect that if Penn State didn't think that they were going to get something from Myles Dread, then they probably, that this probably wouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think he'll be productive, assuming that his recovery goes well. I think we kind of know what he is, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy who's going to shoot pretty good from 3. He's going to defend all right for you. He's gonna be a voice in the locker room. And Penn State doesn't have a lot of those, right? They're losing John Hara. There
Mm-hmm.
aren't a lot of guys who have been around at this point. So Myles is one of those. You look at Seth Lundy, he's probably another one. So I think he can have some value in that regard. But yeah, I mean, Myles is not going to be the guy, taking defenders off the dribble and getting to the rack and that's just not who he is. He's going to shoot the ball. He's going to have great games. He's going to have bad games. He's going to make big shots. He's going to miss big shots.
But part of his profile, especially last season, but in general has been, I think, a question of conditioning. But that's because he's been injured a lot and playing with a torn shoulder labrum. Do you think that and I know that we're getting into a lot of conjecture here, but if he's healthy for the first time in a long time, does that change his athletic profile? He's able to get into shape and actually put some work in.
Yeah, I don't know if it changes what you're getting on the court because this is always who Myles Dread has been. Right?
Got it. Gotcha.
I mean, since he got here, he's going to spot up from 3, and he's going to do the same thing the next time down the floor, and the same thing. You know what I mean? So he has a role, right? He's not going to be a complete guard, and I don't think that's what Penn State needs from him. They need guys who can make threes. So if you're Myles Dread and you're Penn State, that's what you want from him. Can you reliably make a 3-point shot? I'm going to pull up his 3-point percentage from last season real quick, just because I don't have it off the top of my head. But yeah, so he made let me see. So he shot 40% from 3, 41 actually last season. That's good.
Yeah.
So, and I know he infuriated Penn State fans because he would miss the occasional open one. But I do think that if you're a fan of Penn State, you have to kind of recognize that at the college level, guys aren't going to make 50% of their threes. They just aren't. It doesn't work like that. So, if you get 41% from 3 from Myles Dread again, he defends good for you. He's an effective leader in the locker room. Then I think that's a decent return.
Yeah. And playing with a torn shoulder labrum in his shooting shoulder and shooting 41%, I think that's you can see he was effective at less than 100%. So the question just becomes, on the other side, on the healing side, can he get back to that sort of production in time? Because even if he's not 100% next year, I think he provides you with some quality play out there for a veteran. And I've always thought, again, going back now to the toughness profile, 6'4", he is built like a tank. I think he could have been a linebacker I can't turn the football off in my brain. Every time I look at him, I'm like, man, I want to put you at like running back or fullback or linebacker and see what happens. And the toughness, I mean, playing through injury, he and John Harrow would have been a great start to an offense, especially if you've got them at like H-back and fullback and tight end. Okay, so timetable to return. What does it? You kind of covered what it means from a non-play perspective. Is that a large portion of the reason for him to come back as well? Because Penn State needs that sort of veteran presence, or is it equally what he can do on the court? Because as you mentioned, stability, maturity, those are key things in college basketball. If you're not going to get all the talent, you need to have maturity and all that steadiness from being a veteran. So how does that shake out in the locker room with him there?
Yeah, I think it's probably equal parts, right? If Penn State didn't think that he was going to be a productive basketball player for them, I don't think that he would be returning. But yeah, it's important because, I mean, again, they're losing their big guy, right? John Harrow has done this for them for 2 years. He started doing it for them 3 years ago when they were really good. So, it's where is that going to come from now? And I don't really think that there's an obvious answer. I mean, maybe it's Jalen Pickett. I don't think he's an especially vocal guy. But yeah, is it Seth Lundy? Is it Myles Dread? I mean, you've got some options here because I don't think that it's obvious. So I think it's a big deal. I don't think it's everything. I mean, look, so Penn State after this will have, I believe if my math is right, they'll have two open scholarships for transfer portal additions. So with that in mind, if you look at the portal additions that Penn State was able to get last year, right, how many of them were more productive or more valuable than Myles Dread? And Jalen Pickett, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Greg Lee, when he was healthy, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I don't really think anybody was. So it's kind of like, are you going to get more out of that spot from somebody else? And I think the answer is probably no. Although, I guess every situation is different, but I think that this is probably the best move for Penn State.
This is the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. That is Dave Eckert, one of our great reporters here at Blue White Illustrated. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, this is coming out right around the time that we are going to be at Penn State practice. So with that in mind, knowing that we haven't seen anything yet, and we are a week in to Penn State practice, a little bit over that, but we've really only had one chance at the very beginning to see some stuff and kind of get some inclinations of what's going on. What are you interested in seeing tonight at practice?
I'm interested in hearing from Manny Diaz, who I believe is who we're getting, right?
Mike Yurcich, I believe.
Mike Yurcich, even better, even more interesting. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully Yurcich can provide some thoughts on the young quarterbacks, which I know is what everybody wants to hear about. And for me, that's the valuable part of this, right? Like, I mean, we go and we kind of watch them do like ball possession drills and like special teams. So, what you can derive from that isn't always like super informative. For me, it's going to be, okay, what does Mike Yurcich have to say about the running backs? What does Mike Yurcich have to say about Drew Allar and Bo Prabula and Christian Veilleux? So that to me is what I'm looking forward to. I know you like the nitty gritty, T. Frank. So I'll ask you the same question. What are you looking for, out of the practice part of this?
So, I was doing some digging last week, and you as a reporter can understand this. When you're going into something and you have a presupposition, you think you know something and you're looking for the evidence to confirm it. So I was looking at Juice Scruggs because he looked like an entirely different football player, and I'll just skip ahead here to our video from last week of what he looked like in practice. I was shocked at his transformation this offseason. So to me, I was thinking, okay, Penn State is bulking up at the center position to deal with nose tackles, because they saw a lot of nose tackles last year. It was a real problem. And Scruggs didn't quite have the strength to help out with Mike Miranda. That was one of the issues of double teams at the line of scrimmage. So then I thought, okay, Penn State has historically had lighter centers, right? They put more athletic players at the center position so they can get those double teams and then get those reach blocks on the center or the defensive tackle. So I went back through time. That is incorrect. Like, it's been pretty much 50-50 of whether they've had a guy over 310 or under 310. So I want to ask James Franklin and Juice Scruggs, why the weight gain? Why specifically do that this offseason, and what you're looking for from the center position when it comes to all that stuff, and has it changed over time? Just kind of educate myself on what they're looking for and what they're trying to accomplish at the position, because to me that was the biggest thing, and one of the biggest things this offseason. I know everyone's excited about Nick Singleton, and they're excited about some of the other players that are coming in on offense and defense from the freshmen. But if they can improve along the offensive line and have some higher highs, peak a little higher, I think that makes everything easier. There were times where there was blocks to be taken advantage of. But it wasn't like they were wide open running lanes ever. It was like, okay, this is technically big enough if the running back hits it perfectly, and that didn't happen last season. So if Juice Scruggs and the guards that are lining up next to him are more physical and more intimidating and more efficient in their double teams, I think that makes a huge difference. So I want to get a little bit more information, dig a little bit more on that. So we're speaking to Jonathan Sutherland, James Franklin as well. What are you expecting when it comes to your weekend? What are you observing? Is there something that you want to know from a positional battle perspective?
I think the linebackers are interesting, right? Kobe King, Tyler Elsdon is kind of what James Franklin made that out to be when we talked to him on last Monday, which seems like forever ago already. But
it does.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. So yeah, I think that's interesting. I didn't really get the chance to see either of those guys at practice, so I think that's probably what I'm going to hope to look for and just kind of see how they're looking. I don't think we really know a lot about what's going on at that other safety spot alongside Tig Brown either. So I think maybe going and looking and checking that out might be something that I try to do. But yeah, I mean, there's stuff there's things to watch for all over the field, right? Yep. And again, like, the window that we get into this isn't probably the most indicative of like what's actually happening, just based on the part of practice that we're allowed to see.
Yep.
So, what the coaches say more than anything that our eyes tell us, I think, is more important. But there's so much to cover at this point in the year, right? There's so many questions that we don't know the answers to. So definitely expecting a lot of information out of tonight.
And that's why, and by the way, and this is kind of how the sausage is made that no one cares about. They're at opposite ends of the field if you want to see the offense and the defense. Mm-hmm. They're on separate fields on the opposite ends. So I get my cardio in because I'm one of the few people that will run back and forth because I want to see everything. So if you see me sweaty out there, that is why. Which is good for you. It's good for you. If they're running around on the field, I feel like I can run around on the sideline. It's not that weird, is it, Dave? Am I getting...
No, it's fine. And it'll be a little cooler for you out there, right? Like,
hopefully we're outside. That's a good point. Hopefully we are actually outside.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I really hope that we're not inside, because then it's really hot, right? Like, you gotta wear your winter coat to get up there because it's freezing outside.
Yeah.
And then you get into Haluba and it's 90 degrees.
Yep.
it's
brutal. And I know that, like, fans may not care about the difference, but the difference in what you see from what I see, from what I can get to bring to you here on YouTube, it makes a difference being outside. So you better be hoping we're outside as well, so you can get better video coming up tonight on Blue White Illustrated, or should I say in a couple of hours, as this is released Wednesdays in the afternoon. That'll do it today for the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. That is Dave Eckert. We'll be back with our mailbag episode coming up tomorrow.